back to the podcast, Frank Pavone, National Director for Priests for Life. Welcome back.
Andy, it's great to be back with you again. Great to be at another CPAC.
Always a pleasure to see you, Frank. I was walking by the Supreme Court at the very time the announcement came out where the Supreme Court ruled on Roe v. Wade last June.
What a day.
It was an incredible day. We celebrated a major victory. However, much work lays ahead of us in the states. Can you tell us what we have to do?
We have to get on the playing field for pro-life more than ever. Some people mistakenly thought that this was the final victory of the battle, but it is not. It is an important victory on the way to protecting the unborn. Why is it not the final victory? Because the Supreme Court didn't give protection to the unborn. What they said was the people and their elected representatives may protect the unborn if they wish. What they did was got out of the way the roadblock that had been set up by Roe v. Wade, which said you cannot protect the unborn. So we are now on a level playing field. And the benefit for us and the hardship for the abortion supporters is that they now have to make the case for abortion on its merits rather than just invoking some kind of magical, invented constitutional right to abortion. In other words, they've got to explain to the public, they've got to convince the voters, they've got to convince their elected officials, why is dismembering a child a good thing for that child, for that mother, for that family, and for society? They don't have any persuasive arguments. We, on the other hand, do, and we have always been making the case for life based on the merits. So what am I saying? For the same amount of work, for the same kind of arguments, for the same kind of effort, our work now bears more fruit because Roe v. Wade is out of the way. That's no time to walk away from the battle. That's a time to press in even harder. That's challenge number one, for people to understand accurately what Dobbs did and did not do in reversing Roe. Second challenge, because the other side has lost this magical constitutional right to abortion on the federal level, they are now trying to put it into the state constitutions. And they have done that in a number of places. And even this year in 2023, next year in 2024, they will be trying it in many, many more states. We've got to be fighting that. We have to show that it's a cowardly act on their part to try to get a right to abortion in the state constitutions. Because again, if they do that, then they don't have to make the case on its merits as to why abortion is good. Again, they're hiding behind the courts. They're hiding behind the Constitution instead of going, again, to the people and their elected representatives. So the battle is engaged across the nation, but also at Congress. They haven't lost their responsibility, too, to legislate to protect these babies.
I want to focus on the victories in the states right now. I know that we're engaged in the battle, and thank you for illustrating how the battle has just begun. We cannot rest on our laurels based on what the Supreme Court did, although, it was a wonderful victory. We're acknowledging what they did, but the real battle begins now. In what states have we been moving forward?
Well, Texas is the first one that comes to mind. They have passed multiple laws that bring protection to babies right from the time of conception. And I was recently there. I spoke at a statewide convention and took part in a march in the Capitol in Austin. And there we were standing, and one of the heads of the state pro-life groups was saying, and now every abortion facility has closed and stopped doing abortions, and the babies are protected. And we're standing there saying, wow, this is language that we've used for decades as a hope, as a goal, as an effort. Now we're standing here declaring it as an accomplished fact. About a dozen other states have provided protection from the time of fertilization for these unborn children. Alabama, many of the southern states have been able to accomplish this. Then you've got states where, like where I live in Florida, we're protecting the babies now starting at 15 weeks. And that's much better than it was before. We expect to have even more legislation right on the horizon that will bring it back perhaps to the time that a heartbeat can be detected. About 5 other states allow it from the time, or rather protect the babies from the time a heartbeat can be detected. And that's for tremendous progress too. So those are the victories: fertilization, heartbeat, 15 weeks. And what do you have after that? You have a number of states that protect them from starting at 20, 22 weeks, but then you've got the states that on the other side of the coin are allowing abortion right through birth, which is incredible.
Our members were very involved in Minnesota. They sent over 1,000 messages to the state legislature to stop the PRO Act. They failed. We will move on undaunted, but what a horrible, horrible bill that was in Minnesota.
Absolutely. That happened just recently. And of course, in the elections, in the midterms, Michigan, California, Vermont are passing these outrageous provisions, some of them in their constitution, saying that there's a so-called right to abortion. The thing we have to realize with this is what Dobbs said in Reversing Roe was that never in American history was a right to abortion ever asserted before the time of Roe v. Wade. Not in a state court, not in a state constitution, not in a legislature, not even in a scholarly article. Well, if that's true to say for the United States, it's true to say for Minnesota, for Michigan, for California. In other words, now Ohio has a big battle shaping up now. South Dakota as well, and a number about 10 other states, I think, coming up in these next two election cycles. What are we to say? We have to say this is invented. This is not historical. This is not true, and certainly it's not moral. But if the people get engaged, we can win these battles.
Hear, hear. So, what does the landscape look like moving forward?
Well, we have not only these individual state battles. Recently, we had a meeting of pro-life leaders, and I regularly coordinate these strategy discussions. We had about 40 leaders at our headquarters at Priests for Life for about 3 days. And we came to some very good points of consensus. And one of them was that all these national groups are going to look at these state battles, and we're going to make sure every state battle, starting now, as I said, with Ohio, becomes a national battle. In other words, the states can't be left to try to win by themselves. We've all got to weigh in on it. So going forward, there's going to be more national to state collaboration. And the second thing we have to keep in mind, I mentioned it briefly before, Congress still has its duty. So the debate is going to be among the congressional representatives. Do we want to pass a law protecting babies starting at 15 weeks? Do we want to go earlier, go to heartbeat? Do we want to go all the way to the beginning? Whichever way, we want to do the maximum protection for which we have legislative consensus. But whichever particular bill is chosen, the bottom line is that people have to remember that the federal government still has a role here. Dobbs did not take it away from Congress. It gave them more freedom to legislate. And the reason we need to legislate on the federal level is that, first of all, the other side is going to try to legislate their abortion until birth provisions on the federal level. We've got to be there fighting against that. And secondly, this is something Congress has already been doing, even under Roe v. Wade. They've been legislating to protect these babies. It's not enough just to remove funding from the abortion industry. We need to provide actual protection for these babies. As long as people understand that, talk to your elected representatives about it. Because if they were to pass, for example, a 15-week limit, guess what? That applies then in Minnesota, in Michigan, in California, because of the supremacy clause. It'll start protecting those babies, even in those very blue pro-abortion states.
Frank Pavone, thank you so much. Thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for taking the time to visit us.
My pleasure. Thanks
God
for your
bless you.
work.
Keep up the great work.
All right, we will.